something that apparently afflicts more people than I possibly imagined. Lyme disease. Apparently it's a pretty big deal. And we're going to speak with Randy Sykes about that. But I think given all the crazy that's going on here as we try and wrap up the year, we should probably check in with Scott Bennett. This whole assassination thing in Turkey at an art exhibition, while almost simultaneously a Russian diplomat gets killed in his own home in Moscow. But it's odd because the Turkish authorities are being very cooperative with the Russians. They sent a bunch of detectives there, 18 or so Russian detectives, and the shooter's cell phone may be sent to Moscow for analysis. Okay, now this is a little strange. This is just a little strange. This is from dailymail.co.uk. Revealed. Tunisian asylum seeker wanted for Berlin massacre with the truck was jailed for 4 years in Italy for burning down a school and arrested 3 times in Germany before police lost him. Now get this. Terror suspect Anis Amri, 23, from Tunisia, served 4 years in an Italian prison for an arson attack on a school. His ID was found in the footwell of the truck used in Monday's attack, which claimed 12 lives and injured 48. Isn't it funny how all these terrorists somehow wind up leaving their identification cards around for the authorities to find? That right there, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that gets my attention. Seems like a practiced terrorist would not have any identification on him at all if he was about to engage in a terrorist attack. But anyway, they found this guy's ID in the footwell of the truck. Now, German security officials had him under close surveillance between March and September. He was suspected of dealing drugs and planning robberies to finance the purchase of assault rifles. He was allegedly arrested for, I thought it was GHB, this says GBH, and having a fake passport, but vanished in December before the attack. Now, more than 120 tiny earthquakes have taken place during a 7-day period recently between Mount St. Helens, but the U.S. Geological Survey said there's no sign of an imminent eruption. Beginning November 21, 4 swarms of small quakes were detected. The tiny earthquakes were mostly too small, magnitude 0.3 or less, to be exactly located by the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network or even felt on the surface. My question is, why publish this if it's nothing? And you may be asking, why mention it if it's nothing? Just to let you know that we are awash in information, and a lot of it is just plain clutter. Now, I don't think this is clutter. It is interesting. From metro.co.uk, a woman says she is permanently housebound because she's allergic to Wi-Fi and phone signals. Kim Diata can rarely see friends and family because electromagnetic waves from modern technology give her migraines, fatigue, and even infections. She's a former nurse and has to wear a shielded bed net on the rare occasions she leaves her home and can only visit places with poor mobile phone reception. The debilitating condition has forced her to move home twice due to phone masts being built nearby, and she now sleeps under this special net. I guess, according to the article, maybe she takes it with her when she goes out. It's an interesting look, I'm sure. She hopes that speaking out about electrosensitivity will help people understand her unusual condition and be more sympathetic. She said, "Most of the time, people think I'm mad. It's so difficult because people are not feeling it themselves. I've not seen friends and family for so long. I've had 2 visitors for half a day each this year. It's heartbreaking, really. The only place I can go is Crewkern or Lyme Regis, as if I go anywhere else, I get some serious symptoms. I had not seen my closest aunt for 10 years, and she really didn't understand why. We were so close before. I couldn't bear it anymore. She was 91 at the time. I had to wear my shielded bed net over my head, and you can imagine I got some funny looks on the bus. It was so tough for me, but I'm pleased I did it because she died the next year, and if I hadn't seen her, I would never have forgiven myself. She said her problems started when she was 16 and living in South London, and she started to become ill when she was near television sets. It got worse a few years later when she was working as a staff nurse in intensive care, and she bought a mobile phone so she could be contacted in an emergency. She said the first time I put it up to my head, it was like a laser going into my brain. Every time I put it in my head, I got the pain. After that, I was finding I was getting more and more fatigued. My immune system was getting knocked down, meaning I was getting infections. She discovered more about electrosensitivity and realized her problems were being caused by waves emitted from mobile phones, TVs, Wi-Fi, and electronic devices. So she moved to Glastonbury to escape the waves and felt better until a few years later when a mobile phone mast was installed in the town center. And she says, I now realize my health started to deteriorate from that point, and I started to experience migraines, fatigue, and infections. At first, doctors thought I had a slipped disc in my back, but that wasn't the case. I saw another doctor. He said it was something in the environment, could have to do with electromagnetic fields. I was in the library on the computer and got these pins and needles in my arms, and my face felt like it was burning. I thought I'd just have to cope with it. When the town got 3G signal, Kim started to experience breathlessness and heart palpitations and moved to Chard, Somerset. She said my head felt like it was going to implode and explode at the same time. I was also getting breathlessness, heart palpitations, lower back pain. I'd started to suffer from serious earaches and was becoming really sensitive to light. I had to ask a friend to pick me up because the pain was so tough, and that it was. I could not live in Glastonbury anymore. And her aunt sadly died, and after that her cousin gave her some money. With that money, I booked a world trip to go places where I could escape the signals, but everywhere you go, they started to put up mobile phone masts. I wear a shielded head net, which gives me 50 decibels of protection. I'm telling you, you know that expression, there's a seat for every bottom? There seems to be an ailment for every body. Unbelievable. Well, I started into this yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Joe Arpaio. Regardless of what you may think of Joe Arpaio, he has been relentless on this Obama birth certificate thing. Obama's birth certificate is a fraud, says Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Full press conference with shocking proof. This is 369news.net. It was across the face of the Drudge Report. It's a fake. And if you watch the video, it does appear to be a fake. You have to ask yourself, why would this man be so determined, particularly since we've had to put up with this president for 8 years? He's on his way out. But Sheriff Joe released his damning evidence anyway concerning Barack Obama's true origins. Who is the man we called president for 8 years? Was his name really even Barack Obama? Where'd he come from? Thank God Donald J. Trump is now the president, or all of this would have been swept under the rug by a Hillary term in office, that's for sure. You can find the YouTube video real easy. Just Joe Arpaio, A-R-P-A-I-O. Birth certificate is a fraud. That'll bring it right up. 5 years he's been on this. And, you know, the Justice Department down there trying to find some sort of a reason to remove him as sheriff, or, you know, give him the third degree over racial profiling and all this other stuff. But he didn't stop. Speaking of Obama, Are we really surprised about this? From Washington Examiner, Obama shock. Another $6 billion in midnight regulations. President Obama, who this week has issued a flurry of environmental rules, is planning to unleash another set of midnight regulations right before he leaves office that will cost Americans $6 billion. Obama's already broken all past records on creating federal regulations and red tape, and his new ads will boost the overall price tag to over $1 trillion. The new regulations, according to the watchdog group American Action Forum, include 4 from the Environmental Protection Agency and 1 from the Department of the Interior. These 5 measures alone could impose $5.1 billion in costs and more than 350,000 paperwork burden hours. In addition, 3 other rules in proposed form could add $898 million in burdens and 146,000 paperwork hours, for a cumulative total of nearly $6 billion in potential midnight costs and nearly 500,000 burden hours from the 2 agencies. Consider, EPA and Interior have already imposed $349 billion in previous burdens since 2009. He raised concerns that the new environmental rules were rushed to build on Obama's legacy of attacking climate change. Speaking of climate change, a report came out that the North Pole is going to experience a 50-degree increase in temperature, bringing the overall ambient temperature to about 32, which was identified as the melting point. I thought 32 was the freezing point. Oh well. It's a work in progress, don't you know? And one last thing. The New York Times is frantic over a Russia-Iran-Turkey trilateral alliance on Syria, possibly undermining Washington's Middle East imperial agenda. John Kerry was excluded from their Tuesday Moscow meeting. So was pro-Western UN Syrian envoy Staffan de Mistura. With Syrian forces scoring important anti-terrorist victories, excluding Washington and other Western nations from current talks, quote, all but guarantees that Assad will continue to rule Syria under any resulting agreement, the Times lamented. In the meantime, reports are circulating that liberals, yes, progressive lefties, are buying firearms at a record rate. In fact, it has been reported that firearms stocks are dropping because every time Barack Obama and his crew, threatened another gun grab, either real or imaginary, stocks went up. And guess who owned a lot of those stocks? Barack Obama himself, it has been reported, and the Clintons and a lot of other people that are so anti-gun that every once in a while they decide to give those stock prices a little boost. So they threaten a gun grab, and AR-15s go from $900 to $3,000 or something close to it almost overnight. Well, that's fun, isn't it? Okay. Well, why don't we talk with Scott Bennett after this beautiful musical interlude and see if any sense can be made of all these goings-on. Possible to cover up the disease because of a failed vaccine called Lymerix. And so, that pretty much says it. That pretty much says it all. His video documentary has over 60 documents that show several attempts by the U.S. and several other governments to downplay Lyme disease. His video also shows several documents on biowarfare, infecting insects, and using them as a way to pass along weaponized agents. This video also shows the death of, it says here, babies and adults. Seems a little grim. Well, we'll get to the bottom of it. Randy Sykes, good to talk to you. Welcome to the program.
John, thanks for having me on. You'd be surprised how the news media wants nothing to do with this. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to return a call. So you're pretty brave to go ahead with this.
Well, I'll tell you, You know, you have to be careful. But, you know, what you say and what you talk about, you really do. But because, as I like to say, some people, I am either a Nazi, a Zionist, a left-winger, a right-winger, a genius, or an idiot, depending on what mood somebody's in at the time they hear me say something, or what part of what sentence they think they heard me say, but which I didn't necessarily say. But when it comes to government cover-ups, well, that's it. I mean, people will say, well, you're into conspiracy theories. This is the biggest conspiracy theory of them all. And I say, no, I'm not interested in conspiracy theories. I'm interested in actual conspiracies. So, tell us about you, and you've been doing this for over 20 years, so something must have led you to this work. There must have been an aha moment at some point.
Well, back in the late 90s, I started getting sick, and I had like a flu that wouldn't go away. It would ease up. 3 or 4 days later, the flu would come back, then it would ease up. And this went on for probably a year. And I just kept, every time the flu came back, I got a little bit weaker, a little bit worse. So I went to Leahy Clinic up in Boston, Mass. That's where everybody goes. If you've got a problem, you go to Leahy Clinic to solve it. I left there with a diagnosis of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, beginning stages of MS, and possible leukemia. So they basically sent me home to die. On a Friday night, 5 o'clock, I'm leaving Boston, and it starts snowing. So it was a hell ride all the way home. 3-hour ride, took 6-7 hours.
Yeah,
Then,
no kidding. That's pretty rough diagnosis.
yeah, well, it's kind of vague because MS is a symptom of something. They have no known cause. They have no test to prove you have it. It's a clinical diagnosis. Kind of like, let's say, Lou Gehrig's, Alzheimer's, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, lupus. All these diseases, they're Parkinson's, they're a clinical diagnosis. They have no blood test to say, yep, it's Parkinson's. And yet Lyme disease mimics every one of those symptoms. And the first thing you'll see in my movie, the very first document, is the Dearborn meeting from 1994, where the CDC knew that they had the worst test out of the day. The best test was Imaging Labs, 91%. The worst test of the day was the Western blot, which came in at 14%. Now, since then, they've even I even called the FBI, hoping that they would do an investigation on this, but that kind of foolish. They even removed some of the bans, like they removed ban 31 and 34, IgG, IgM. They removed those bans. Those bans show exposure to the Lyme bacteria. Now, why would somebody not want to know if you've been exposed to the bacteria?
No. When you're talking about these things that were removed, what are those things?
Oh, they're antigen bans. When they test you for Lyme, your body has to produce antibodies. And if your body can produce the antibodies, the antibody test will pick them up.
Gotcha.
But most people don't produce the antibodies. It takes a good 6 to 8 weeks to produce them if you're lucky. And like you say, 86% of the people can't produce them. You're dealing with a stealth pathogen, and it just keeps changing its form, so you really can't trace it down.
Good
so
Lord.
They removed ban 31 and 34 from the Western blot.
Meaning, now what does that actually mean?
Well, the ban 31 and 34 show exposure to the bacteria. They removed them because the Lyme-Rex vaccine they came out with, which was a big scandal, the Lyme-Rex vaccine triggered ban 31 and 34. So rather than the doctor just asking the patient, you've got ban 31 and 34, did you have the vaccine? No. Well, then you've got Lyme.
Oh, gotcha.
Another interesting thing, the Western blot is set up. The Western blot was never a diagnostic test for Lyme. The Western blot was set up as a surveillance test to do a surveillance to count the number of people. And the CDC said maybe 15 years ago, for every positive Western blot that comes back positive for Lyme, there's 10 to 12 people out there that have it that tested negative. So it's a scam from the very beginning.
Well, I thought that Lyme disease was caused by ticks. I knew somebody back in the early 90s. It was a young woman who claimed she had Lyme disease, and she just and she would suffer from like aching joints and aching muscles and all of this. But I thought, well, okay, watch out for ticks.
Yeah, well, they're infected with all kinds of viruses and bacteria, and there's even one thing you'll see in my movie is the pathogenic mycoplasma, patented by the Department of Defense. It's a disabling agent, which a few doctors and researchers have found it in the Gulf War from 1991. The Gulf War illness was this mycoplasma, but the ticks are carrying it. How did a patented bacteria get into a tick?
One of them bit a test subject, maybe, and it spread. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm guessing.
So I have papers in the movie where they're growing and infecting ticks to see if they could transmit disease agents as well.
Now, Randy, you realize that for some people this is going to be like, what? You got to
Yeah.
be kidding me.
Yep. That's why I did this movie, because I say something and immediately after that you'll see the document, or during. And this was a tough job. Again, I'd like to thank the Simsbury Cable Studio because they worked with me on this. They did all the editing, and this was a lot of work. They said, why don't you just do your talk, and then we'll have links to like New England Journal of Medicine or PubMed and give the number. They can research it themselves. I said, no, you can't, because people will never take the time. They'll never take the time to check this. They won't fact check it. And if the document's right there, there's nothing they can do to you. You're telling the truth. So they did edit every document in, including, I think about half a dozen FBI papers. Now there's freedom of information emails in here from the CDC. We did a protest at UConn Medical Center in 2006 because they just came out with the new IDSA guidelines that Lyme's cured with 10 to 14 days. Well, that kind of got my gander up. We had a $20,000 reward if any doctor could prove that Lyme is cured with 6 weeks of IV. We showed up in front of UConn. Of course, they're not going to come out and accept the challenge. But little did I know at the time in 2006 that the emails were going through the CDC. They were upset with me because I was pushing buttons, and they were afraid that someday the American news media might catch on to this. Well, they had several emails in there, and you will see that these guys are either evil or clueless. You've got Derlin Fish, who was out of Yale, and he admits in his email, in other words, they couldn't challenge me. We cannot win this battle on a scientific front, he said.
Are you serious?
Alan Steer saying that there is a form of chronic Lyme in people who are not treated early. That's 90 with a test that's 14% accurate. 90% of the people are not going to be treated early. And this is just Lyme disease. This isn't. There's Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichiosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. These things are cesspools, and they're just checking for Lyme. So it's a nightmare. And I mean, I've seen people that have died from this. It's linked to Alzheimer's. And there's a doctor doing research now. He took over. Paul DeRay was a military pathologist, and he was linking this Lyme spirochete to all sorts of illnesses. And another guy has taken over his work. He's got some really interesting stuff he's found.
Well, does this now, as you're talking about this stuff, take us through these points that you're making as if we have absolutely no idea. I mean, for example, those bands and so forth, because you've been doing this for a long time, so you're using some of these terms like salt and pepper. And we're not going to grab that right away. You know what I mean?
Sometimes I get overboard with it, yeah. Well, the Western blot was set up as a diagnostic test for the Lyme disease. And when you get, like, there's Western blots for Lyme, there's Western blots for all sorts of illnesses, but as you end up getting sick with something, they do this Western blot, and it checks your body's antibody response. And your body's antibodies will be produced to go against this infection, whatever you're dealing with. And the test is supposed to read them. Well, not so much. The Lyme Western blot, well, first of all, the Lyme Western blot isn't, the problem with that is if the test was 14% accurate, like I say in my movie, the CDC found a way to make it even worse. They have what they call an ELISA test that they do before the Western blot. If your ELISA comes back negative, you don't have Lyme. If your ELISA comes back positive, you still don't have Lyme. A positive ELISA allows them to run the Western blot. So technically, you're probably worth 7 to 10% positive chance on getting tested for Lyme. And they're overlooking Bartonella, Babesia, the Mycoplasma. I have 3 strains of Bartonella, 2 strains of Mycoplasma, and Babesia, along with the Lyme bacteria.
Well, how did you bump into this stuff?
Each tick lays between 2,500 to 3,500 eggs.
Oh.
Yeah, and the tick that does the damage to you is about the size of the head of a pin. They're tiny. Once they bite you and fill up with blood, they 3, 4, 5 times the size. But most people never even feel the tick bite them because when the tick bites, it spits into your skin. It's a narcotic. It numbs your skin. And as the tick injects himself in, then he vomits and it turns into an adhesive. So it's almost impossible to get him out. Then they draw blood into their stomach 2 or 3 times and vomit it back into you, so it empties out their gut where the spirochetes are.
I
Then
swear, man, the devil must have invented that one. That's disgusting beyond
yeah.
description.
Oh, they're terrible. They're terrible, and every one of them carries something. Every one of them carries something that can kill you or make you sicker than hell. Problem with Lyme disease, it doesn't kill you quick. With Lyme disease, you can linger for 10, 20, 30, 40 years before it takes you out.
So this disease was relatively unknown before 1975. That's kind of what I'm getting. Is that true?
Yeah, the spirochetes were around. There's 300 strains of the Borrelia spirochete, and the spirochete was around. I'm thinking even 100 years ago they might have found it, but not the way it is today. I mean, when you get bit by one of these things today, especially we found out the sicker people. I don't know if it came from Plum Island. I know I have probably 30, 40, 50 papers where they were infecting ticks. I can't necessarily say the Borrelia spirochete was being put into them, although we do have papers they were infecting ticks with spirochetes. But there was an extra powerful strain around Lyme, Connecticut, around Plum Island, and people got hit years ago, and it clobbered you. Today, it's getting that way all over the country. It seems like it's spreading, getting more powerful every year.
Well, now, why were they infecting these ticks? Was this an experiment that went wrong, or was this a deliberate deployment of weaponized ticks, or what is this?
I would say it was intentional, for one thing. It was intentional, and it was, I guess, biowarfare. They wanted to make sure that they had hands up on everybody. I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this book at all?
Hold it real still. Yes, hearings before the Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research, Committee on Human Resources, and the top is biological testing involving human subjects by the Department of Defense. Wow, exactly. Nice, 1977. Okay, gotcha.
Now, in there, the things that they were talking about, Senator Kennedy was very upset because I guess it was Department of Defense. They say the United States Department of Agriculture was playing around with this stuff too, but they took canisters and they dropped them in the subways of Manhattan and New York. I mean, this has nothing to do with Lyme disease, but just to show you what they're capable of. They wanted to see what effects it would have. Then they'd call the emergency room the next day and see if you had people vomiting or nosebleeds. They let off gases in the tunnels in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. They've done stuff that's really, there's no need for it. No need to be doing that. And this is where they were, 300 pages. I put one page in my movie, biological experiments where they were growing and infecting mosquitoes with rickettsia, viral and bacterial agents. Now, a new paper just came up from Willy Bergdorfer. He's the guy that discovered the Lyme spirochete. And it was being referred to, he died a few years ago, and his wife found this box of papers and gave him up. And he's referring to the Swiss agent going into the tick. And the Swiss agent is rickettsia. There's Rocky Mountain spotted fever is a strain of rickettsia. But this was a strain, the Swiss agent he's referring to was a strain that was not native to this country and ended up here. He's dead and gone now. But, and here I'm talking in my movie about putting this rickettsia in mosquitoes. It's kind of stuff that shouldn't be happening. And they say that they want to stay on top of biowarfare in case it's ever used against us, that they can take care of it. But an interesting thing with this is, if anybody that's not familiar with the Tuskegee experiment, you can go online, type in Tuskegee timeline. It'll come right up to the CDC's website where they say when good medicine goes bad. This is where they took, in one group, Miss Evers Boys, there's a documentary on it.
Yeah.
They took 399 or 412 black men in one group and gave them syphilis. And when they died, the study was over and they did autopsies, removed their brain to see how much damage was done to it. And this went on for 40 years before it ended. Syphilis is a spirochete, a cousin to Lyme disease. So when the syphilis spirochete, when that study was done, when the men had died and they got caught 40 years later, they stopped it, of course. 3 years later, Lyme disease, the second spirochetal infection of the century, pops up, and they're still denying treatment on this disease as well.
Now, what possible reason can there be for suppressing this information? Is it because it's going to tip off the American public that they're conducting experiments on large numbers of citizens, or that's an easy one? But what else?
Yeah. Well, I think for one thing, one of the biggest problems is after World War II, everybody signed a pact saying that the governments would no longer do biological experiments. Of course, they all were. But if this Lyme disease came out and they admitted to what's going on, then they would have to admit that they were playing with biowarfare. Even though everybody's done it, they're saying, we don't do that stuff. And it's so much proof, so much information. At the end of my movie, you'll see a young lady who lost 2 babies during her pregnancy. And after the first one, she went on 7 months of antibiotics. And when she got pregnant, after 7 months, she felt fine, got pregnant the second time. She stayed on a low-dose antibiotic throughout the pregnancy. This baby died at 16 or 18 weeks. And the autopsy, the fetus and the placenta were still positive for the Lyme bacteria. So there is no killing it. If you don't catch this bacteria early, it owns you. It'll take you out eventually.
Man.
Yeah. Well, in my movie, I do a brief presentation. Some stuff is pretty scary, and then there's a 10-minute presentation by Dr. Phillips. My wife and I worked with Blumenthal when he was a senator. When he was Attorney General in Connecticut, and he held a hearing. And you'll see Dr. Phillips do a 10-minute presentation, and it's document after document after document. Somebody taking antibiotics for 7 years, and they die of heart involvement. One, autopsy reports, 10 minutes of presentation. At the end of that 10-minute presentation, the Commissioner of Health in Connecticut tries to downplay it and shoot it down, and he challenges him. So, of course, Dr. Phillips, he's really, really good at what he does. He read the whole presentation back. It's just at the lowest forms of government, they're downplaying it. We refer to CDC as Center for Deceit and Corruption.
What is it with the CDC anyway?
They were behind the Lyme-Rex vaccine. They're pushing vaccines now that everybody knows is causing problems in children. There's a movie called Vax.
Oh, yes. We met with the producers and the participants and seen the screening. And
yeah. I plug his movie whenever I can because that's how people learn, by educating them. Maybe they'll wake up in time,
Well, yeah, go ahead.
One problem we have is gratitude is probably the shortest-lived human emotion, because I have helped well over 1,000 people, and probably half say, when I get better, I'm going to get involved and help expose this. And they get to a certain point in their life and they're gone. They don't want to be bothered. And it's too bad people can't remember. I mean, people can hold anger and a grudge for 20 years, but when they're having that gratitude to get out and help somebody else and maybe turn the page, so they speak, and people don't do it. That's why you can't get anywhere, because nobody wants to admit this. Nobody wants to know how devastating it was. I tried getting actors and actresses because nobody wants to look at me. If I can get a good-looking woman or a handsome guy to do this video with me, it would get more attention. But as soon as they found out what it was, nobody would touch it. Nobody wanted to know.
Well, that's pretty amazing. So I'm just wondering what it would take. I mean, we're talking here, so, I guess this is a start, but...
Haven't been shut off yet.
No, not yet. But I'm just wondering, what is it? It always takes something dramatic. They say that nothing changes until, there's blood in the street. But that seems to be true. But just take a look at Europe right now. But after the humanitarian refugee initiative, that's not working very well. I'm just wondering what... we're talking about this right now, but I wonder about how many other problems. You look around and you see the general state of the public's health, and you go, well, is everybody eating the same thing? Are they drinking the same thing? Are they? What's causing this widespread diabetes and the widespread health problems? What is it? 2 in 3 men and 1 in 3 women will get cancer. It seems like that should have alarmed somebody, but I don't hear anybody freaking out about it, and I only hear those messages on public television. I don't see that stuff on what you would call the mainstream channels. I don't think public television is really all that mainstream. I'm thinking that, yeah, go on.
I think the one problem is Americans are too easy, like American sheeple. They don't want to know the truth. As far as GMO foods, most of the people in this country don't want to know. They just want to go about their business, go about their life, and go to dinner, go to a movie, and they don't want to hear about the problems. They don't want to do anything to improve anything.
Is this just human nature, or is there an added component that's causing that?
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of speculation on why people are kind of brain dead. They don't. Nobody wants to pay attention. Nobody wants to hear it, and that's how you can't get a movement going when people aren't willing to step up to the plate. Take a chance.
Well,
I look at the children that have died from this disease, and or death isn't bad. It's when you live forever. I used to run 2.5 miles a day, and I got to the point where I couldn't walk 0.3 of a mile. And I've got pain, arthritis all through my body, brain lesions where, this movie was really put me over the edge because this was a lot of work. And I don't have the capability of concentrating for a long length of time because of the inflammation in the brain. I just wish people could step up and start doing something. Everybody's afraid. We're the free country, and everybody's afraid to do or say anything.
All right. So, what's the speculation out there that seems to be the most widespread as to why people are so disengaged?
I wish I knew.
Okay.
Maybe selfish. Maybe they're just selfish, and they, it's I, me, my. They care about themselves.
I guess, but you would think if your life's in jeopardy, you might take some sort of an action and sing out. But people used to be able to run to their local newspapers and get some action. They used to be able to run to their local television stations and even their local radio stations and get some sort of play, at least get somebody to look into something.
Yeah.
Or you'd have an intrepid reporter out there that went, he'd get his fedora on and get out there with his notepad and start taking notes and start writing a story. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
No, that's why when I did this movie, this documentary, everything I say, there's a paper trail right there because nobody can doubt it. Nobody can dispute it. Nobody can attack you on it, especially when a lot of the stuff in there is embarrassing for them. There's, nothing in there that's embarrassing for me. I've told the truth every step of the way. So it's basically the ball's in their court. And I just don't know. All the corruption. When I called the FBI and I explained to them, I said, if you have evidence of people dying and the government's responsible, what do you do? So the FBI agent asked me, well, what have you got? I said, watch my documentary and get back to me. Well, the agent didn't, or did, I don't know. I called back 3 weeks later because they wouldn't get back to me. And very standoffish. She said, well, I suggest you contact the FBI tip line. As I'm talking to an FBI agent now, why would I want to contact an FBI tip line when I've got an agent on the phone? Well, there's nothing, we've suggested what you can do. There's nothing else we can do to help you. I said, okay, hypothetically, let's just say I get home and I have 1 or 2 scotches and my wife calls. She's got a flat tire. So I drive down there to help her and a cop comes by to see if we're okay, smells alcohol on my breath. I'll be handcuffed, thrown in the car will be towed, lose my license and go to court, the whole 9 yards. I said, and yet these people, the CDC can set up a policy where people are dying and it's not a problem. It's just, don't worry about it. It's okay. I don't know. I really thought there'd be some changes by now.
I'm going to your website, ctlymeriders.com, and I see you got an 11th annual Lyme disease poker run. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Tony's his wife was diagnosed with MS, and I probably shouldn't discuss it, but she's very sick. She's having all types of neurological seizures and stuff. And nice lady. And he started doing this to raise money for education. And like I say, 11 years. I went through it a few times, but I can't take my Harley. I put about 3 trips on my Harley in the last year and a half because my health is so bad. I probably haven't gone 50 miles in a year.
I'm wondering, is this Lyme disease thing, is this America specific?
No, it's all over the world.
It's all over the world.
Throughout the world, and most countries follow the CDC guidelines.
Yeah,
it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Well, I'm looking at CDC.gov right now, and it has a black and white map with just the outlines of the continental U.S. and a couple of inserts for Hawaii and Alaska. And this seems to be occurring. I mean, it's like solid blue in the northeastern states, and then there's a pretty good amount of spackling here around the Great Lakes area, but very little anywhere else.
There was a young girl who was a college student. Her first name was Megan, and she got a grant from the NIH, CDC. I don't know who she got the grant from, and she did a map of the United States, the 48 states, on MS deaths. And then the second part of her grant was a map of the 48 states with Lyme disease deaths. And each area was highlighted where most of the cases were. You can't tell the difference between those two maps, the MS deaths and the Lyme deaths. You can't tell which map is which. That's how accurate, that's how close they are. And again, here you're talking about MS. There's no test. It's a clinical diagnosis. A spinal tap doesn't really, it's not definitive. It may show that like protein being elevated, which you're going to get with Lyme disease. But MS, lupus, Parkinson's, all these diseases, it's a clinical diagnosis. And yet Lyme is held to a higher standard where you need a positive test. And, the positive test, even if you get one, they're going to say, oh, it's a false positive. So they've done their best to downplay this disease for 42 years this spring.
Well, what do you make of this then? I mean, at the end of the day, are we suggesting that Lyme disease is an artificially created ailment?
Well, that could be. There's papers that we have that they have stimulated the ticks, infecting them with spirochetes. We don't necessarily have Borrelia. We haven't proven that yet, that they did Borrelia spirochetes, but we know they've done spirochetes. What they're carrying, the Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus, that is patented by the Department of Defense. And I'm thinking 40% of the ticks in Connecticut were carrying that infection. I could be wrong. I'm just going by memory. I think at least 40% of the ticks were carrying the Mycoplasma fermentans, which is patented as a disabling agent by the Department of Defense. That's in my movie. You'll see the front page on it. It talks about it's an award or grant from the Department of the Army. And there's just too many things that don't make sense. Too many things that really almost couldn't happen by themselves. And the concentration of why all of a sudden in 1975 did these ticks decide it's time to explode and just start infecting everybody? Because, I'm sure people got bit by ticks before that. I was interviewed by Jesse Ventura in 2010. And what we talked about there is there's a video. His show was shut down because they were upset with him. He had a conspiracy theory show, and what he would do is show that what you think is a conspiracy really isn't. And he had a clip of Plum Island did outdoor testing of ticks. They took, I don't know how many, thousands and thousands of ticks. They infected them and let them go loose on the island. They wanted to see what effect it would have on the animals. And like I told them, the thing they didn't think about is birds do fly back and forth.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
and
they do.
This is what happened, That's what I believe happened. Because just all of a sudden one day it exploded.
So if somebody's feeling like hell and they go to the doctor, what is done for the doctor to arrive at the conclusion that they have Lyme disease? Well,
first of all, the doctor probably won't. For the first mistake they make, let's say you got bit by a tick this weekend, say this Saturday morning you get bit by a tick, it could take 6 to 8 weeks before your body even starts to produce antibodies. And 86% of the chance is that you won't produce them. You won't test positive. And then one doctor was telling me, well, PCR is 99.9% accurate. And I said, well, yeah, PCR is accurate. But I said, an example of the PCR, take your son or your grandson out in a rowboat, go fishing all day. At the end of the day, you come rowing back in. If you haven't caught any fish, can you assure me there's not one fish in that lake? This is the same thing with a PCR. If you detect the bacteria and you capture it, you got a really good chance on coming back positive. But if you don't detect it, It doesn't mean it's an absence of proof is not proof of absence.
Wow. Okay, so, wow.
Yeah, and it's destroying lives. Even if you're lucky enough to find a doctor that will test you for Lyme, and you're lucky enough to have the test come back positive, they're only going to give you 10 to 14 days, and chances are that's not enough.
10 to 14 days for what?
Antibiotic treatment.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, and then, I mean, if you got bit by a tick and you're not having any symptoms at all, you should have 30 days of antibiotics. If you got bit by a tick and you're having symptoms, you should have a minimum of 90 days. And at the end of the 90 days, you evaluate the patient. This was from Dr. Danta's research. He also worked with the veterans on the mycoplasma infection. He did some trials on that. But you need at least 90 days of antibiotics if you're having symptoms. And at the end of the 90 days, you evaluate the patient and see where you stand. If you're still having symptoms, go another month, go another 2 months. Sad to say, I've done antibiotics for 15 years. I went like 13 years and stopped, and it came back on me. So I started, 2 or 3 times since then. And there is no cure for it. You're dealing with, see, an antibiotic has to have a cell wall. I mean, bacteria has to have a cell wall for the antibiotics to attack it. And most of this stuff is cell wall deficient. And antibiotics, it takes them forever to get these bugs. It's kind of scary, isn't it? But this is all around you.
Yeah, it really is. And what I'm thinking now is, so if you really do have it, and they'll only put you on an antibiotic regimen for 10 to 14 days, so that means you're just going to check out. It's the disease eventually just going to kill you, and that's it?
Yeah, well, what happens when you have Lyme disease and you get a short course of antibiotics? What'll happen is the short course, you'll start to feel better, but now you haven't knocked it out. And when you stop the antibiotics, it comes back with a vengeance. It'll come back. Don't ever take steroids if you have Lyme, because that's called steroid disaster. But if you get the antibiotics in you and then you stop and you haven't killed this, it comes back like gangbusters. It comes right after you.
Well, I'm just wondering how many people are affected by this every year.
Oh, there's when I was talking with Jesse Ventura, with the producer they pulled up evidence. They said there was, I don't know how many million people, and this was in 2010, how many million people are disabled from this disease. Yeah,
I'm looking here in that another CDC.gov section. How many people get Lyme disease? Each year, approximately 30,000 cases. However, this number does not reflect every case of Lyme disease that's diagnosed in the United States every year. Well, this is where I come a little unstuck, and that is, let's see, Project One, Lyme disease testing by large commercial laboratories in the United States. So let's see, what do we got here? It says estimated the number of people who tested positive for Lyme disease based on data obtained from a survey of clinical laboratories. Researchers estimated that 288,000 infections occur among patients for whom a laboratory specimen was submitted in 2008. Okay.
And you got to figure how many times that didn't test positive, because the CDC has said, they've changed it now, but I've got a paper trail in the office, but what they said years ago was for every person that tests positive, there's 10 to 12 people out there that have it that tested negative. They know the test is roughly 10% accurate.
This is weird, Randy. It says to improve public health, CDC wants to know how many people are actually diagnosed with Lyme disease each year, and for this reason has conducted 2 studies. Now, this comes after the paragraph above, which says each year approximately 30,000 cases of Lyme disease are reported by state health officials and the District of Columbia. However, this number does not reflect. I read that already. So Project One is, it says here, to improve public health, CDC wants to know how many people are actually diagnosed with Lyme disease each year, and for this reason has conducted 2 studies. Number one, that first thing I read, that researchers estimated 288,000 infections occur among patients for whom a laboratory specimen was submitted in 2008. And then Project 2, incidence of clinician-diagnosed Lyme disease, because the first one, Project 1, is Lyme disease testing by large commercial laboratories. This is incidence of clinician-diagnosed Lyme disease, 2005 to 2010. Estimated the number of people diagnosed with Lyme disease based on medical claims information from a large insurance database. Researchers estimated that 329,000 cases of Lyme disease occur annually in the U.S. And then it goes on to say, or state, results of these studies suggest that the number of people diagnosed with Lyme disease each year is around 300,000. Okay, well, it says each year 30,000 at the top. Now it's 300,000 at the bottom. Notably, these estimates do not affect our understanding of the geographic distribution of Lyme disease. The disease cases are concentrated in the Northeast, Upper Midwest, 14 states accounting for over 96% of the cases. Results obtained using the new estimation methods mirror the geographic distribution of cases that's shown by national surveillance. So they can't even keep their typos in order. It says 30,000 at the top, says 300,000 at the bottom. That's a lot of people.
Their motto is, it's only cheating if you get caught.
Right, gotcha.
Who's going to do anything to them? My wife and I worked with Blumenthal in 2004 in a state hearing, and we asked somebody from the CDC, NIH to come. We had some questions for them. Well, they said they didn't have anybody, so we pushed them under protest. A gentleman from the CDC and one from the CDC and person from the NIH came with an attorney. Anything we asked, we'll get back to you on that. So they got a lot to hide, but they don't answer to anybody. Who are they going to answer to? There's nobody that has any control over them. My father died from this probably 15, 16 years ago. We were down in Rhode Island, and he was walking on the side of the road. It could be 25 years ago, and he was covered with ticks. He must have had 100 on him. And at that time, brush them off, don't worry about it, not a big deal. And I saw him go downhill. Excuse me. Saw him go downhill. His health went. He was having trouble walking. Then his brain started going. And he died. He finally died from it. They diagnosed him with Alzheimer's, which here again, it's a disease that when you get Lyme disease, I have lesions on my brain, the inflammation. And back in, I don't know, in the late 90s, I couldn't add 13 and 13 on paper. That's how bad my brain got. And antibiotics have brought it back, kill the inflammation, kill the swelling. But after my father died, I was taking care of my brother. 6 months later, my brother's dying of cancer. And at the same time, I'm just feeling horrible, And of course, you're going to be upset you lose your father and brother. You're going to be bummed out about that. But I was feeling just really wicked, really terrible. And I took some time off after they were gone. I just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And that's, this is when I started searching on Lyme disease. And I left Leahy Clinic, went to a little country doctor at the other end of Connecticut. And she found, through a certain test she did, PCR came back positive, which is, you got a better chance of walking on water. But she had 2 tests that came back positive, one for the PCR. And that's how I got treated. But it is a clinical diagnosis. When you go to your doctor, the diagnosis of Lyme is clinical, going by your symptoms, and then response to treatment. If they give you antibiotics and you start to get worse, you start to get sicker, that's called the Jarisch-Herxheimer reaction. You're killing off bacteria, and they decompose in your body, and you've got to flush them out, sweat them out, whatever you can do. So that's one of the symptoms of Lyme disease. When you start getting treated, you actually get worse before you get better. The kill off, and that goes in cycles. It's like the ocean. The first Herxheimer, unbelievable, and after that it gets milder and milder until it levels off. But I don't know of any way you can kill these things to this day. I don't know of anything that kills them once you become chronic. And the MS Society, these people don't want to lose their money. They got a good thing going. The MS Society does admit now, if you've been diagnosed with MS, you should get a blood test for Lyme. But you got, it's 14% accurate. Then you throw the ELISA in, you got about an 8 to 10, maybe 8, 9, 10% chance on testing positive with a 2-tier testing. Oh.
Man, that is something. That's something. Well, look, I'm glad you came on to talk about this, but I'll tell you, I have no idea other than to, bring you on the Caravan and get the word out to people that this is yet another problem that we have to look forward to dealing with, because if this has been going on for, 75, so over 40 years?
42 this spring. I did my movie. It was the 40th anniversary of Lyme disease, and that's why I did the documentary.
Well, wouldn't you think by now somebody would have picked up the torch and decided to,
No. Well, it's very taboo. I'll tell you what. Did you get a chance to watch the video?
I did not.
Okay, watch the video and then call your state reps, call your senators and congressmen. Say, I just saw this video online. Say it's not a conspiracy theory, it's all documents. They will not get back to you. I've sent this link to I don't know how many senators and congressmen, and it's like, hear no evil, see no evil. They don't want to know. They just blow you off. They won't even respond to you because it's all true. And like here's one I'll show you. This one might cause some problems.
Okay.
Can you read the very top of that one?
Human drug testing by the CIA, 1977. And where did that? How did you obtain those documents?
Most of this stuff is available through your state library. Like in my movie, you'll see, I believe I found the recipe, the creation for the AIDS virus and Lyme disease, because in there it's talking about the 91st Congress. And it says immunent biologists believe that within a period of 5 to 10 years, it'll be possible to create a totally new synthetic biowarfare agent, an agent that does not naturally exist and for which no natural immunity can be acquired to. The first phase came out in 1975, that's Lyme. The second phase came out in 1980, that would be AIDS. And all this stuff is available through your state library. A lot of them are on file. You can do a word search, and a lot of them are scanned in already. But it's just crazy. That's where the LSD came from. That's where the LSD experiments came from. They were doing things they really shouldn't be doing. One of the things that really freaked me out in this the human drug testing, they had a guy sitting on a park bench, noontime, reading his newspaper, and they made it's like a rifle that shoots radio frequencies. And they aimed it at his head, and they're talking about it in there. They can change the frequency. They can make him laugh. They can make him cry. They can make him violent by changing the frequencies. And everything's in these books. And not right. It's not right that they have a chance. They shouldn't be doing this stuff. But the 300 pages in the biological experiments, it just goes on and on and on. That's why I did this video, because, I'm going to be 65 years old. My health is terrible. I could vapor lock at any time. And I just wanted to get everything out there that I have. And there's so much more. The movie's 42 minutes long. I tried to keep it under 30. And the information that I have in there, there's so much that I left out. There's so many papers that I left out that there's just no room. There's no room for this stuff. But there's no limit to what you could possibly dig up on this subject. So.
Wow. Well, honestly, Randy, I don't know where to take this. Obviously, there's a problem. But if nobody will respond to any kind of, shall we say, official inquiries,
yeah,
I'd rather say formal inquiries, then what do you do about this exactly?
Yeah, really. That's the problem we have. When you see people's lives being destroyed, you see a kid that's in school and a kid that's getting, pretty good grades. All of a sudden his grades tank. He's getting in trouble all the time. You got to suspect Lyme. A kid that is not acting the way you would expect him to act. And all of a sudden he crashes, starts getting into trouble and grades tank. Too much suffering. And, like I said, that's why I did the documentary, because everything is there. You got a paper trail. You can read everything you need. And I tried to cover everything. I think I have one on Parkinson's, one on MS. I don't know if I got anything on lupus, but they're all just like fibromyalgia. That's a positive test for Lyme. But this is just, it's a way to, I don't know. Like I said, I've tried everything I can possibly think of to expose this, and no luck. And the problem is that, once you find out you got Lyme disease, now you got to find a doctor that's willing to treat you. And doctors are losing their license for this all the time. They're being attacked. They're being investigated. They can't take insurance, because the first thing the insurance company is going to do is complain. I don't want to pay for this. So they start an investigation against the doctors.
Well, well, I'll tell you what. In the guest media there, of course, is a link to your YouTube show.
Oh, good.
And I guess maybe step number one is raise the awareness, because I got to tell you, you're the only person who has ever come on this program to talk about Lyme disease at all, ever, since its inception, which is almost 3 years now. I mean, I had no idea. You hear about it here and you hear about it there, but But it is strange that once you hear that somebody's ill, it's not even a third party. It's like you're like I am 3 deep from them. A friend of a friend of a friend of a friend tells me, and yeah, they're struggling with Lyme disease, and then I don't hear another thing about it.
Yeah. Well, it's so overwhelming. I think that people just, once they start getting better, first of all, they're probably never going to be normal unless you catch it early. If you go like 3 months and then you find out you have Lyme and you get long-term treatment, you'll do fine. It'll take you 6, 8 months, maybe a year, and you'll be back to normal again. And sometimes the people relapse. But if you're at a point where, like I went like 2.5, 3 years, I should have died. That's how bad I was. I probably should have died. I've lost vision in one of my eyes. Hearing went, just crazy stuff. Then the vision comes back 50% better. Then you get a day where you can't walk because your legs are giving out. Because this is a neurological infection and also affects the nerves. And what I tell people is, if you get to the point one day where you can't walk, relax. Time to catch up on TV, because probably in a couple of days you'll have another symptom and the legs will come back. But I can't put it into words how devastating it is, how terrible it is. And I've seen people, perfectly healthy people, come down with this, and heart involvement and just crazy. And I have somebody I'm going to try to hook you up with. He's been doing research on Alzheimer's. And, I can get back to Ken after on this. He's been doing research on Alzheimer's. He took over. Paul Duray was a top military pathologist. And I spoke with him before he died, maybe 6, 8 years ago. And he was saying that this Lyme spirochete is in the brain, and it's causing problems. It's causing symptoms of MS, symptoms of Alzheimer's. And he's passed on. There's another gentleman who's taken over. And his presentation is just shocking. He's found worms, spirochetes, and parasites in the human brains. And I think he did 20 in a row, at 20 MS and 20 Alzheimer's. Every one of them, 100% of each brain came back with a Lyme spirochete in it. So the information's there, but nobody, the powers that be aren't going to listen to it. They're going to sweep it under the rug and say you're crazy. That's why I have documents in the movie, everything I say, because they'll just downplay it. And a lot of the American people aren't really savvy enough to make their own decision. So I loaded up the documents and let them be the judge.
Well, very good.
I'm just glad that you gave us the time to do this, because, and feel free if you want to, you can run that movie on a show sometime. If you got a blank spot, feel free to run it. The only thing I did, I made the agreement that if anything is changed, it would have to be pulled, because when I put it in there, I wanted to make sure the movie stayed just the way it is. Nothing modified, nothing altered. And It's an eye-opener.
Yeah, well, we'll do it the right way, and rather than run it on the program, we'll put a link in your guest media, and then people can go to your site, and that way you can see how many people saw it.
Yeah, beautiful.
But I'll tell you the truth, Randy. I don't know what else we can do at this point, but I would invite you to reach back out to us if something changes, whether something goes right or whether something goes wrong or whether it goes weird. Please let us know, and we'll bring you back on, and you can tell us all about it. Because I'm telling you, this one really came out of left field to me. Because I only hear about an incidence of someone suffering from Lyme disease just every once in a blue moon, but not often enough to go say. I think we better get into this. I figured it was just people out there hiking, they got tick bit, and that was it,
Most people don't know they have it because they get sick. You go to your doctor, they run the test, comes back negative. Well, we know you don't have Lyme, but we don't know what you do have.
Well, how do you explain that the CDC, of course, that bastion of accuracy and truth, right? But if these diagnoses are so infrequent, where do these characters get the 300,000 figure?
Well, that's probably positive test. It's probably the positive test that people have had, because you're supposed to report. Although Hartford Hospital in Connecticut, they weren't, because I was talking to them 5 years ago. They didn't. Oh, it says Lyme disease isn't a reportable infection, and it was.
Right.
So Connecticut was highest in the nation for the longest time. I think it's probably the labs that get a positive test, and then they register with the CDC, Center for Deceit and Corruption, and then you get the positive test, and then they mark it down. We had 30,000 positive, so that's, times 10. 10 or 12 is what they used to say. Times 10 or 12 is what you end up with.
So, based on this, the 300,000 number, I suppose it would just be a guess and maybe even a real stretch to figure maybe there's another 300,000 to go undiagnosed?
I'll bet you more than that. Jesse Ventura said something about, I think he said if Lyme disease can disable 3 million people, what else is available, that can cause the same damage? I think he used the term of 3 million. His show was pulled. It was pulled off the air back in 2011.
Yeah, was this when he was doing conspiracy theory?
Yeah, he did a show on Plum Island, and I was interviewed on that, and they weren't happy. I was told that they were told to water the show down, and they did. But after they aired it, I guess that's the Congress and Homeland Security, they were not happy with the show, and they told them don't run it again, and they did run it again, and that's when they shut his show down. It's too bad because he really enjoyed doing that. I can send you a copy of that because he gave me a copy from the director's cut. It's right out of the studio. I'll send off a copy to you.
That's interesting that they pulled his show.
Yeah, they had high ratings and it was gone.
Oh, they didn't pull just that episode. They pulled his whole program off.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, gotcha. Well, for a minute I thought they just didn't air that one episode.
Well, they did run his show a few times after that, and the Plum Island show wasn't on. Mm-hmm. But eventually, the Plum Island show went back on another, like a fourth or fifth time they played it, and then the whole series was gone.
Gee, do you get the feeling that the media and the government just somehow don't want to tell us the truth about stuff? I mean, do you ever get that feeling?
No.
All right.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's
so, how's your health now? You all right?
Yeah, I'm not doing well. I've got, I have a lot of trouble walking now, any distance. I do have, I'm having wicked headaches again. I just started antibiotics. I'd stopped for like 6 or 8 months. And just, the infection of the brain swelling. And I mean, I've taken antibiotics for so long that when you take them, you feel instantly sick because of that flavor, like a mouthful of nickels or something. But it's the only thing that keeps me going. So if I take more, pop down the antibiotics for a couple of months, get it down, and then ride out the storm, see how long it can go. But there's no cure for it. Once it sets in, there is no cure. They haven't found anything that'll take them down. I mean, I've taken, I did IV, oral antibiotics at the same time, and I guess it would be like if you could picture a swimming pool. It's in the springtime, and that pool is green, polluted, and then you dump all kinds of chlorine, and you shock it, and it comes right back real quick. Mm-hmm. You can't do that to the human body. You can't pump that many antibiotics in because it would kill you.
Yeah.
But I've done pretty well. I mean, I was capable of doing this movie. In fact, during the interview, I was running a fever, and I was diagnosed with pneumonia 2 days later. So I do have a couple of times where my brain freezes up and I stumble. But I'm very fortunate because I was capable of doing this. I lost my job and my pension, but I did get a disability. So it allowed me to keep functioning and keep doing. But not everybody's that lucky. A lot of people end up losing their houses. And, if you've got a big mortgage, people spend a lot of money and lose their job. They can't stay there. They're out. And I always kept my bills down low so that I wouldn't have a problem like that. But no, it changes your life, especially if you're married to somebody that's sick. It's not fun because half the time you can't go anywhere. My day is usually over by 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. By 10, 11 o'clock, I'm wasted.
And when does it start?
Well, that's another thing. I don't really sleep. I'm in pain all the time. If I get 5 hours sleep a night, that's doing good. And I won't sleep during the day. Because if you sleep for an hour during the day, that's an hour less you're going to sleep at night.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I just get out of bed, try to stay in bed till at least 6:30, and then get up and start the day.
Well, look, naturally, I wish you well, and golly, man, it's just I don't know what, when I'm talking to somebody that's in a spot like that, you want to say something, but you don't really know what to say when they're in the spot that you're in, other than, God bless you and may he help you. Maybe, I mean, if you're coming on the program can spare somebody else what you're going through, that would be great. But the thing about it is, they may not even know they have it.
No, most likely don't. It's the biggest conspiracy ever pulled on the American people. It's the biggest scam. They're ruining people's lives, and I mean, babies dying, and these guys don't care. They're going out of their way to cover it up. I was a quick story. We had a hearing in 2004. One of the doctors attacked a 10-year-old boy that was speaking. This 10-year-old boy went to this rheumatologist. I'm sorry, my brain sometimes. The rheumatologist.
Okay.
And he had two CDC positive tests for Lyme. This doctor looks at the two tests. These are false positives. Now, how can you tell they're false positives? These are false positives. Your son has fluid in his hip. I'm setting him up for surgery. So I spoke with the mother. We met at a coffee shop, and I spoke with her, and I said, he's got two CDC positive tests, and you're going to do surgery? I said, get some antibiotics. Do that first.
Now, when you say CDC positive test, did he go to the CDC and have the test conducted there, or what?
No, this is I'm sorry, I didn't explain that right. This is the Western blot, the Lyme test.
Okay, gotcha.
The CDC guidelines, you have to have so many bands to be considered a positive case.
Okay, good.
Not for diagnosis. The Western blot is not a diagnostic tool. It's a surveillance tool. So if you get 100 people that have positive tests, you can bet 1,000, 1,200 people have Lyme that tested negative. So this little boy is going to have hip surgery, and the mother listens to me, gets him on antibiotics. He's doing fine. Well, he speaks at our hearing about a year later. He's doing great. He's speaking at our hearing, and he says the doctor from the Yukon Children's Hospital looked at my papers for about 30 seconds and says, you don't have Lyme, and you most likely never did. You have juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So at the hearing, Zemmel, the doctor, gets up and attacks him and gives out his medical records. This is a televised hearing. So the next day I filed a complaint with HIPAA because he put an article in the paper that I was mentally ill, that he didn't have Lyme. So I got him with HIPAA, filed a HIPAA complaint against him. Took 10 months and they hadn't done anything. And I finally called the HIPAA office and say, you're going to do your job? He said, well, the doctor has a right to know that you're filing this complaint. I said, the doctor knows because look at the bottom corner of the form. I checked it off and signed it. He can have my name. I said, when I get off the phone, I'm going to call his office to verify that it is me that filed it. Do your job. And he says, well, is this complaint hearsay? I said, yeah, you want to hear him say it? I played the clip from the hearing. He says, well, yeah, okay. So after 10 months, I started calling him every week. They finally made him write a letter of apology for violating HIPAA on television.
And what is HIPAA?
HIPAA is your medical records are protected. They're not supposed to discuss, like you go to your doctor, you sign that HIPAA form.
Yeah.
And the doctor cannot give your records out to anybody on the street. It's private.
Just wanted it on the record. Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
And this guy violated HIPAA right at a televised hearing in Connecticut, going through the whole state of Connecticut. Mm-hmm. So they slapped his hand. Could you imagine a doctor treating Lyme disease if he violated HIPAA?
Not really.
Placed right there.
No, that doesn't sound good at all. Now, the fluid on the boy's hip, was that caused by the Lyme?
Yeah. In fact, I've had my knee aspirated 3 times, my left knee, and it's pretty painful. The knee gets so bad that you can't bend it. And then they go in with a long needle, stick it, and they plunger, pull it out. I've had that done like 3 times now. And it's painful, but if it's the worst thing I ever have to go through in my life, I'll be happy. Wow. There's people doing a lot worse than me. People have had knee replacements, hip replacements, neck surgery. Although I have a disc in my neck that is slipped a little bit, probably because these little, it's like Pac-Man, these little spirochetes going through your body, eating up everything they can get at. And they love the brain. They love the CoQ10. They love the brain and the heart. They love to eat that too. So,
man, that's just disgusting.
Yeah, but it's the biggest secret. That's the amazing thing. When you get a chance, my movie's like 42 minutes long from beginning to end. Watch it, and you're going to be shocked because everything in there is a document, and nobody can dispute it. Nobody can say this is all made up. You're going to like the one little piece I put in there on the military paper, just to show you how how out of control they are. After the recipe for Lyme disease and AIDS, the next thing I throw in there, just to show you how ridiculous these guys can be, they were talking about getting rid of biological chemical agents from World War I, World War II, Korean War, early start of the Vietnam War. These were bombs. Later on, they were missiles, and they were chemical biological agents. They had to get rid of them. So they talk about a deep ocean disposal. They had 27,000 tons that they had to get rid of, that they dumped into the ocean. 27,000 tons.
Was that all?
You know, they have no respect for the environment or anything in it.
Man. All right. Well, we're going to be keeping up with you, and man, I hope you get some rest and some peace over at least over the holiday time.
Oh yeah, I got my my grandson. My granddaughter is 3 years old, and she is a terror. She's a handful, boy. She keeps me moving.
Well,
he thinks I'm Santa Claus. He thinks I'm good friends with Santa Claus, or I am him actually.
Oh, perfect. Oh, you are actually Santa Claus and just won't tell her.
Could be, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, God bless her. Thanks for coming on and telling your story and putting us wise to this. We will, we'll see sometimes that there's a synchronicity here. I got a feeling that we're going to be hearing some more about this from some other sources, and maybe eventually we can shine some light on this, because it doesn't sound good. Those numbers are too high to be ignored. And I mean, the CDC, if the CDC says 300,000, you estimated maybe double this, maybe more, maybe 1 million, maybe 3 million, something.
Could be 10 times, because they're the ones saying multiply by 10 or 12, so it could be in the millions. Well,
then surely there'll be some more information coming up in the not too distant future. Once the caravanners get a hold of this, I suspect many of them are going to have an aha moment, and they'll get into it, and they'll let us know what they find.
That's, like I said, I've got more information. I've got connections with researchers. I can hook you up with a professor who had an attempt on his life. If, he'd probably come on.
It sounds great.
We'll be in touch. We will be in touch with you.
Send his details to Ken. That'd be great.
And I really do thank you for the opportunity to do this, because it's just, I just can't believe that this is still going on. I can't watch the video and then contact your state reps and say, I saw this video. I'm kind of alarmed. Can you tell me anything about it? Nobody ever gets back to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe the fact that they don't get back is a story in itself.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
They're trying to protect their phony baloney jobs. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. God bless. Take care. Take care out there.
Bye.
Wow. I really wasn't expecting to hear that. Were you? I mean, it's just beyond anything that, I was going to say it's just beyond anything I can possibly imagine. But I can imagine quite a bit. And given the cover-ups and the, twisted information that it starts off one way and it winds up, I mean, it's worse than telephone. When you're in the, don't they call it telephone? You got a Chinese fire drill. What do you call it? A campfire telephone? You got a ring of people around, a circle of people, and the story winds up entirely different. By the time it gets back to the person who started it, it's just wild. Well, we are awash in information, so once we get the information, then what? Collate it, throw out the rubbish, boil it down, and whatever remains must be at least partially true. All the uproar over the thank goodness, the new President-elect Donald Trump, and then this assassination in Turkey at Ankara, and then it's been reported that there was a Russian diplomat killed in his own place. I want to say in Moscow. I thought, why does this look staged? Because it does. Yes. I mean, now I haven't stood there and witnessed a bunch of people being shot to death right in front of me. So, but I've seen plenty of dash cam videos and others, and they don't. Those videos and what you see on these videos, police shootings and so forth that everybody's seen, or a lot of people have, did not look like what happened to the ambassador to Turkey. So what better person to discuss this with than the one and only Scott Bennett. His website is armypsyop.wix.com/shellgame. And as you may already know, from 2009 to to 2014. Commissioned officer, Army Special Operations, psychological warfare is his specialty, and I got a feeling, I have a feeling we're in the midst of a psychological war game. Welcome, Scott. What's going on?
It's good to be with you, John. Yeah, you're certainly right. We are in the war game, and this is the time to begin to dump all the pieces on the puzzle on a table and let the truth naturally magnetize them into the picture, the image that makes the most sense. And that's what we're doing right now with this ambassador being shot and killed, the Berlin truck attack, the Russian that was also simultaneously killed, the diplomat, and some of these weird things that are happening specifically in the Syria, Russia, Iran conversations, and how Obama fits in and how Trump will fit in.
Oh, boy. Well, let me ask you about this. Looking at, now, I don't know how credible this source is. I mean, they seem to come up with some pretty good stuff, but this is from telegraph.co.uk. And the title of the article is Russian Ambassador's Assassin Guarded Erdogan. Roland Oliphant and Laura Patel did this in Istanbul. And he was a Turkish policeman, murdered the Russia's ambassador, provided security to Erdogan on multiple occasions in the months leading up to Monday's assassination. It has been reported. Guy is 22 years old, or was, served on police details backing up Mr. Erdogan's personal bodyguards 8 times since the failed military coup. Let's see. But here's the thing that's strange. I mean, maybe this is normal, but the Turkish government's blamed the attack on Fethullah Gulen, a U.S.-based preacher and critic of Mr. Erdogan, has also been accused of orchestrating the failed coup in July. The Kremlin has distanced itself from those claims on Wednesday, saying it was too early to name Altintas's possible accomplices. But then it's like Russia sent 18 detectives and intelligence officers to Ankara to take part in the investigation, and Titas's mobile phone may be sent to Moscow for analysis. I thought the Russians and the Turkish weren't exactly getting along. Why so much cooperation? What's going on here?
Well, it's very interesting, and we have to be honest with ourselves and the facts and really look at this with a clean slate. And I've been, over the last 24 hours, I've been going over again and again and again what we know, what we don't know, and who benefits. And, I'll just read a couple of the notes that I've been taking that'll guide our conversation, because it's important, because it's so easy to get confused and sidetracked, and smoke screens are going to be put up and distractions are going to be thrown at us to get people all tangled up. So let's not tangle ourselves up by going from the very basic foundation upward and look at the schematic of possibilities. So let's start out with either the Russian ambassador assassination was fake, a theatrical performance sponsored by Turkey or Russia or Israel or the U.S. or some mix of those parties and designed to influence behaviors of people, or it was real, authentic, and not sponsored by those countries, but instead was executed by a fanatic and suicidal Turkish rogue police officer with an Islamic Wahhabi Sunni Salafist Takfiri delusion that all human beings who are not in agreement with his brand of Islam should either convert, die, or pay the Jinzi slave tax. That's the simple choice. Either it was real or it was fake. And then we move on to, well, let's see what the evidence shows us. Let's see what we know so far. And if it was fake, let's look at some of the things around that. If it was fake, it explains some of the big questions I have, why there was no blood around the body of the ambassador. There was no blood, there was no pooling of blood, there was no spatter marks of blood, there was no smears, there was nothing on the podium, there was nothing within a half a foot or 1 foot diameter or radius around his body. He had a closed mouth expression, as did the shooter. Most people, when they die, have open mouths and open eyes. The blood seems a little bit artificial, a little bit red on the shooter. So there's some forensic scientific analysis that needs to be done around the bodies to, that should be done if we're really going to do an investigation. So I hope in one sense that it is real. I hope this did happen. But I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. We have to trust and verify, as Reagan said. So otherwise, we can be easily lured. So no one gets off of this. We're looking at the facts in the body and the physical evidence. So one of the big things that we need to look at is the entire video of this ambassador when he walked in, when the video was turned on, and he went to the podium and he started speaking. And apparently, he was 2 minutes into his speech when this quote Turkish policeman shot him in the back, supposedly 8 times, and he fell down. Now, some of the things that were weird, he didn't fall on his belly. He didn't crawl away. He simply supposedly fell down and then was on his back. And again, there's very little blood. So there's a science issue that's there. Now we go to, if this was fake, well, who benefits? What's the purpose of this? Well, my conclusions are Turkey benefits from this because it establishes the grounds for a police state, an expansion of Erdogan's power. It is reminiscent of the night of the Kristallnacht, as we saw in Nazi Germany, where they can do the Reichstag burning and all that jazz. So suddenly you have a panic. Suddenly you have a police-powered dictator saying, I'm going to do the second purge. This Gulen individual is an easy target. We see this World War I shadowing. This also, in an Erdogan weirdness and an Erdogan psychoticness, if you will, the logic may be, if Turkey did this, if Turkey intelligence operated this, if Erdogan planned it, it brings Russia closer to Turkey because now Turkey can run up to Russia and say, Gulen did this, we didn't, we're your best friends. It enables Turkey to ask Russia to allow it to remain in Syria. Turkey has troops in Syria, in Iraq. So in order to not be kicked out with its tail between its legs, this opportunity to come alongside Russia to say, we'll stand by you against these murderers of your ambassador, just let us stay in Syria, just let us stay in Iraq. So there's a real possibility that it's been an attempt to soften Russia towards Turkey. It also weakens the West propaganda machine against the Russian, Syrian, Iran counterterrorism efforts because suddenly the Western media is being exposed as propagating this terrorist activity. The West, and we don't need to go down all the headlines from the New York Daily News to Fox News to all the mainstream media who have been constantly banging the drum that Dr. Bashar Assad, incidentally, is a maniac, is a bloodthirsty, werewolf who devours babies and sets off gas bombs and barrel bombs and all that nonsense, which is completely opposite of the truth. All of that Western media is now seen as propaganda, and it loses even more credibility in the eyes of the world. Now, let's not mistake this. The eyes of the world are now on Russia's side. This is the equivalent of what the eyes of the world were after post 9/11. When the 9/11 Twin Towers fell, the entire world was on the West's side, specifically America. And that was a great delusion. That was a psychological operation designed for that purpose in order to license the U.S. expansion and empire and Middle Eastern operations throughout 7 countries in 5 years. We saw how well that works out. So this, if this was fake, if it was designed by Turkey, it could have been, Veterans Today has reported this being possibly designed by Israel, the Zionist Likud Netanyahu side, or even Russia could have done this to bolster its position against the West. That's a possibility. If it was fake, these are all the things that we need to conclude. If it was real, let's switch to number 2. If it was real, what we see is this is a rogue Turkish police officer entering the building, sneaking up behind the ambassador and shooting him in the back. And then we see he didn't fall forward. He fell backwards. There was very little blood. But the camera footage will show us the true story of what transpired. And there's also the coincidences, like you mentioned earlier, John, of the Berlin truck attack on the Christmas market in Germany. where this truck was supposedly hijacked. The driver was shot and knifed, the Polish driver, which makes sense. That's a special operations classic tactic. Hijack a truck, okay, and then run it into a bunch of little children and mothers and everyone doing Christmas shopping and singing songs. Well, that's a horrific event. We saw that similar play in the Nice truck attack. So again, veterans today and others are calling that a Israeli Mossad Netanyahu special operation designed to isolate and brand all Muslims as crazies and possibly generate hostility against Turkey or against try and separate the Turkish-Russian alliance. So that's sort of what we know so far is the investigators are coming down to look at it. We see the West claiming it had nothing to do with it. Kirby and the Obama administration claiming to have nothing to do with it. It's very strange, though, that Obama had threatened Russia and said, we'll do an action on our own choosing at our own time, and then this happens. The next step is, what is Russia going to do? What is Putin going to do? He's not going to soften. He's not scared. He's going to stand up. If he planned this, okay, he better not be found out, or else the world will really get on his case. But if he didn't plan this, if this is really authentic, and they're the victim, they're the true victim and didn't know anything about this, then we're going to see Russia emerge with a position of power and authority and moral leadership in the eyes of the world like it's never had really since the end of World War II. Go ahead, John.
I'm just wondering about this because you got Turkey's a member of NATO, right? And they shot down that Russian jet. How long has that been now? Like 6 months, longer?
Yeah, longer than that, I think. It's back in.
It's like a year.
Yeah. It happened like last September, or September 2015, I think, or somewhere around there.
Well, Putin didn't take the bait on that one. It's like, really, a NATO country shoots down a Russian jet. Putin didn't take the bait. That's how I see it. Then there's all this stuff about, Putin and the Russians, they hacked the election. Well, but all those votes were flipping from Trump to Hillary, not the other way around, so they need some improved hacking skills. What does that even mean? Hacked what? Hacked somebody's email account and then released the information to WikiLeaks, which nobody has refuted its credibility, so then there's that. So then you get the Russian ambassador gets dotted out at an art exhibition by a lunatic with his upraised finger in the air. You said 8 shots. I saw a report that said 9 shots. I only heard 1 shot, and the guy's he's on the floor while this nutcase wanders around. And then the other cops supposedly shot this guy because they were afraid he had a bomb. Okay, where exactly? He was wearing a suit. He was wearing a Man in Black suit, right? And I'm thinking, okay, and now all this cooperation. Oh, the mobile phone may go back to Moscow. And then what about this diplomat that gets, wasn't he rubbed out in Moscow at his apartment?
Yeah.
Now, how do you rub out a Russian diplomat in his apartment? Oh, just the spooks are just running around whacking people out. I mean, I'm telling you, this is a real mind bender. I'm trying to look a few moves into the game like I always try to do, but I can't tell what game we're playing, really.
No. That's where this really gets into a maze because, my instincts immediately when I saw this, I thought that's a false flag. There's no way that, I'm not a doctor, but I've been in the Army and I've seen a lot of guys, who've bled out, who've been shot up and blood spatters and stuff on walls. I've seen the contortions of the faces. I know when guys are shot, they go into an agony and a panic, and it's all instinctual. It's all biological. It's all chemical. This is not you're not in your right mind when you're in the final throes of death. And this ambassador didn't have any blood around him. He didn't have any movement. He wasn't squirming. He wasn't, doing any physical movements. It was one shot, and he goes right down, and then the camera pulls back, and this guy goes on a tirade, and starts giving a speech, which really was more of a speech. It was almost like he was acting. And then I see the ambassador's foot move, and that's it, nothing else, but no blood pooling. And there's a guy lying down next to him. And it was just weird. The ambassador would have had security. He would have had security around him who would have shot that guy the moment he pulled his weapon. But it didn't happen. So I thought, is Russia setting this up? Are they in league with Turkey to off-balance the West? Are they so sick and tired of Obama and these economic sanctions and the psychological warfare tactics and the Ukraine invasion and the UN manipulations? Are they trying to sneak out? Here's the other thing, John. Is the West trying to sneak out its agents, the CIA, Mossad, MI6 agents that are in Aleppo? And that seems to be a very real variable in this equation, because if you have agents being pulled out of Aleppo, being paraded around as United Kingdom agents or French agents or German agents, then you've got some really serious problems. Then you've got war crimes and all sorts of mess comes up. So I thought, was Russia involved with this? But then I thought, well, if the body comes up and shows up that the guy was really killed, I don't think Russia had a part to play in it. But we've yet to see that. Turkey, on the other hand, with Erdogan, seems to be trying to befriend with Russia, trying to, carve up the Middle East. And the way that it can do it is by siding with Russia entirely. And this incident sort of as, I'm on your side. You see, we're going to hunt down Gulen, who did this, and we're going to join with Russia and carve up Syria as we see fit. And then you've got, the other possibility, if this was a rogue Turkish officer, then it's, of course, suicidal, because the Russians are just going to obliterate everybody. The Turks are going to obliterate everybody. Merkel in Germany and everybody up in Europe is going to turn into martial law and burn these people out like an infection, all these refugees and these migrants. So the only person that benefits would be Turkey, Russia, Israel, but it backfired because this wouldn't have the effect of isolating Turkey and Russia. It would have the effect of uniting them. It would isolate the West, and it would give Trump more ability to ally with Russia. And he already has done that by saying, we're on your side. We agree. We're in the fight with you. And it also brings Trump closer to a relationship with Iran, because let's be very clear, Iran, Russia, Syria, and China are all on the same page fighting bad guys. The bad guys are funded by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Morocco, Libya, Jordan, all these Sunni, Wahhabi, Takfiri, Salafist Gulf countries that have an ideological Wahhabism that seeks to dominate the world by expanding Islam by the edge of the sword. It's that simple. That's what we were all trained in. So that Wahhabism is the enemy to Trump. Now, Trump has a lot of neoconservatives on his team, some of which I think are very ignorant, that need to be healed of that ignorance, including General James Mattis, including General Chris Flynn, including some of the other people on his senior National Security Council. But they need to be enlightened that Iran is not the enemy of the United States. It's not the enemy of the people. And we're not going to be fooled into a repeat of the George W. Bush scenario.
Please.
Where we get Huckleberry Finn Bush up there saying he's going to be a compassionate conservative and stop intervening in countries, and he takes a 180-degree turn and goes on this wild, maniacal crusade with Dick Cheney, the child molester, pulling the strings. We're not going to play that game. We're not going to go that way. The American people got Trump into office to stop that, not to continue it. So that's why I'm not so pessimistic when people look at Trump and say, oh, he's got all these Zionists and conservatives and neoconservatives on his team. I don't fall into that, because their deck of cards, John, isn't going to play. The American people are tired of it. They're not going to play that game. They're not going to go that route. They're not going to pick a fight with Russia. They're not going to pick a fight with Iran. They're not going to pick a fight with China. They're going to say, how do we get back to the Reagan days? How do we get back to mutual prosperity and peace and stability in this country? Well, we do it by getting the hell out of the rest of these countries and getting back to a dual polar world. That means Russia You rule this area with Iran and with China, and we're going to rule this area with the West, and everybody's going to be somewhat stable, right? It may not be a perfectly flat world absent of chaos, but it's not going to be this storm that we're currently living in, where everything is upended.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at, I think.
All right. Well, George W. Bush and going in on that BS intel about the weapons of mass destruction. I never figured out why Saddam was launching Scuds into Israel anyway. I never figured that one out. Most inaccurate rocket ever made. And what's the point? I don't even think it killed anybody. I think somebody had, a little old lady had a heart attack in a bunker, but that was about it, And I'm like, what is this? And then you look at George H.W. Bush. The guy says, read my lips, no new taxes. And then about 2 weeks later, he raises taxes. And the reports have come out since he didn't really feel like being president anymore anyway. And he wasn't interested in the second term. So then they that was when they pulled Perot into it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So that sealed the deal for Clinton. But here's something else. Let's get wild with it. Who is doing the fighting over there in Aleppo? And the last time I checked, that was ISIS. So why would this freak with the pistol that supposedly shot this ambassador, why would he be yelling, we die in Aleppo, you die here? Whoa, wait a second. Are you mad because the Russians were shooting ISIS? And does that mean you're supporting ISIS? Oh, that's right, you were. And who was it that was dropping who was dropping the leaflets? Get out of your trucks because there's going to be an airstrike in a few minutes. Was that us or Turkey? Or that was the U.S.?
That was the U.S.
So, Scott, just a couple of guys talking here. What is this Bravo Sierra? I mean, this is like Hotel Sierra. This is like Papa Papa. The first word's Panther.
Yeah.
I mean, what is this?
Yeah.
It's the most stupid, convoluted thing I've ever seen. Now, maybe they know what's going on. I'm pretty sure they have an idea what's going on. But we're sitting out here in spectator land going, what the hell is this? What is this?
Well, look at it like a pool table, and all these pool balls are motionless on the table, and we see these white ball events hitting, and then multiple reactions and movements occurring, and we see, okay, again, coming back to, let's start with the basics, let's start with the foundation. It's either fake or it's real, and if it's fake, who benefits? Okay, if it's fake, the Russians benefit, and Turkey benefits, and Iran benefits, because their whole coalition is strengthened, and the West propaganda is vilified, because we see them being blamed for inspiring these fanatics. So that's, if it's fake, they benefit. Then we ask, okay, well, who did it? And now we have to investigate and follow the NSA signals and the phones and the records and the bank accounts and the passports and the whole history and the history of relationships and the whole schematic of personality profiling. But then if we skip all that and go, let's just say it was real. Let's just say it real. It was really happened, and this ambassador is really dead. He was really shot, and the forensic analysis of the body and the timeline, the videotape is all going to prove that he was shot and died. I'm still can't believe the guy didn't have any blood pooling around his body. But okay, if you're going to say that clothes sucked it all up, soaked it up, and there was no blood that came around, okay, I'll see if a doctor and everybody corroborates that. So if he did bleed out, if it was real, then who benefits if it was real? Who paid him? What did he do? If he was a pro Aleppo, Turkish guy who was on the side of ISIS, again, that doesn't benefit their side. It doesn't benefit Aleppo. It doesn't benefit ISIS. It's going to now make the Russians, who are merciless killers when it comes to killing bad guys, as they should be killed, they're going to go in all sorts of creative directions, including killing all the families of every bad guy that they find in very interesting ways. So the ISIS have lost their cause. Everybody in Europe, now that this is compounded by the European Berlin bus attack, or what has been seen to be a bus attack, that turns everybody in Europe against every Muslim immigrant and refugee that comes in, who benefits from demonizing these refugees. Well, if they're so stupid to do this, and part of me says, yeah, they are that stupid, but if they do that, they destroy themselves. Who else could have benefited? Oh, Israel does, because Israel, Mossad, and the Zionist elements have an agenda to sort of demonize all these Muslims so that they can destroy their governments and their civilizations and their countries to make it easier for the Likud, Netanyahu, Zionist expansion of Israel into these wastelands. What we see is the Middle East is rapidly becoming a wasteland. Well, what happens in wasteland? What happens in ghost towns? Well, you go in, you wreck them, you knock them down, and you build up new condominiums. That seems to be what the Israeli early 1980 plan, the Greater Israel Project, was all about. And we see a lot of the AIPAC influence in the American Congress. I'm astounded, John, that we see so many Congress people, except for Senator Dick Black, who I admire. I think he's a great guy. We've had him on. I know he'd love to get on your show as well. Senator Dick Black is a real man of action, a real man of integrity. I met him and knew him in Washington, D.C. He's a lieutenant colonel from Vietnam, state senator from Virginia, and he's the only one, John, that seems to be standing up for the Constitution and saying we're on the wrong side of history with regards to this whole Middle Eastern war. We should be on the side of Russia and Syria and Iran, not against them, because the real enemy is these Saudi Arabian boy rapists who are fanatical, off-the-reservation maniacs. The hills have eyes, look like Shirley Temple compared to these guys. And Tulsi Gabbard seems to be saying the same thing. Tulsi Gabbard is currently a military officer in the National Guard of Hawaii. She's a major, and she's just passed this legislation or got it going to stop funding and financing and providing material support to enemies, to terrorists, to bad guys, to ISIS, which would shut the brakes on the CIA covert military-industrial complex of arming these guys. She's got integrity because she's worn the uniform. She's seen the boys and the girls with their legs blown off and their faces blown off. She's had to write letters to the families. And now we've briefed her staff on shell game and all of the terrorist financing that we came across. So she's been informed. Dick Black's been informed. You know me. When I talk to these people, I give them everything. And I say, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about this now? And they don't have an option. They either stand for truth, stand for integrity, or they stand for lies and corruption and the military-industrial, pay scale. And those two people in Congress are the only ones I think that we've found so far that have any integrity. But these other congressmen with their stupidity of blaming Russia for hacks, there were no hacks. There were leaks. There were leaks because of the perversions, deformities, dysfunctions, and corruptions in the Democrat Party, which were reflective of Hillary Clinton and her monstrosities. So there were leaks that were done. There were no hacks. Ray McGovern, who's a former Intel guy, has said there were no leaks because we'd know by the electronic signatures. We would have been able to track them like a line of dominoes. Once a hack is done, there's a signal, and the signal connects to relays, and the relays connect to sections, and the sections connect to computers. So we can always track it down. So there were no hacks, there were leaks. And then we see the some of the deaths of the WikiLeaks people that were involved, the WikiLeaks attorney that was pushed in front of a train, the kid who was shot in the back in Washington and his wallet wasn't taken. So we see some weird things that have been moving forward. And we're hoping, and thank God Trump has won the election, and thank God they weren't able to steal it with the Electoral College. But now we see Trump coming in. And I think we're going to see an increasing exposure of Hillary Clinton, of Obama, of all this stuff. And that's why perhaps they're panicking. That's perhaps why this attack on the ambassador of Russia occurred. If the U.S., if Russia didn't do it, if Turkey didn't do it, then somebody did it. And I'd probably say Obama and the Israeli groups are stupid enough to think that this was going to turn against Russia and Turkey and Iran, where I think it's going to have the opposite effect because people are fed up with these games, like you said.
I'm looking at this, Putin and Russia in general, and not just Putin, but the ones before him, were having trouble with, their southern regions, particularly Chechnya, okay? But just looking at this timeline, going back to April 13, 2015, comeback, how Islam got its groove back in Russia. That's nationalinterest.org. And then, let's see, what do we got? January 2016, what Europe can learn about immigration from Russia. Well, it's interestingly, it's been the European countries who've been the subject of the most immigration. It's France and Germany who've had more problems than Italy. Okay, then we move along a little bit to July 19. 5 facts about the Muslim population in Europe. Russia is at about 6.5 to 7% and going down. Let's see, a patriotic Islam. Now, this is from March 8th, 2016. A patriotic Islam, Russia's Muslims under Putin World Politics Review. Then, from May 27 of this year, Putin declares Russia an ally to the Islamic world. Okay. And then Erdogan declares himself the leader of the Muslim world. I don't know if anybody took him seriously, but he did make that declaration. So, are we thinking that, of course, all these writers, they've all got jobs. They got to write something. Yeah. They got an assignment desk. Here, you write something about this. Okay, swell. So they do. So I'm not even sure if any of the stuff that they're writing constitutes any actual intel at all. It just seems like more information for us to be awash in and nothing more.
John, let me, if I may, read something to you. The Duran had sent out an analysis of what the New York Daily News was saying about this assassination, and it was quite horrific what the Daily News is saying, because we've studied this. We're in the know. We research all angles, and to see this coming out on American media is quite striking. But I'm going to read the direct quotes.
Are you talking about Kuntzman again?
Yes, thank you. Yes,
go ahead, let it rip.
Gersh Kuntzman.
Yeah.
Gersh Kuntzman published in the New York Daily News, quote, as Vladimir Putin's man in Turkey, Karlov, which was the Russian ambassador, was the public face of that murderous dictator's war crimes around the globe and of oppression at home. Andrei Karlov is the human embodiment of policies that deployed bunker busters to kill babies, sent fighter planes on scorched earth bombing runs that destroyed a whole city, aided Syrian madman Bashar al-Assad in his campaign that has killed hundreds of thousands, and even ordered attacks on UN workers. That is the most disgusting lie any human being can put from their mouth. And quite frankly, I mean, they should be horsewhipped within an inch of their life by the American people for writing that, because it's pure propaganda. When we look at the timeline of the Syrian conflict, we see these foreign. Okay, let's be real quick and real clear. The Syrian protests, which may have started with genuine Syrian requests for economic or diplomatic changes or governance changes, were fomented and fueled by accelerants that were, as in Ukraine, sent in by the West, sent in by Saudi Arabia, sent in by other parties, outside foreign entities, sending accelerant, fomenting disruption into Syria that suddenly metastasizes and froths and starts to expand. And that expansion, that froth, that smokescreen, camouflaged the guns and the weapons that were coming in from Libya. And then the next thing, you have an armed rebellion. You get people getting killed. And then 3-4 years later, we have where we're at right now. But Bashar Assad is a very reasonable man, very low-key, very mild-mannered. He's a doctor. He's a very sophisticated business-sounding person. He is not a madman by any degree. He's been also approached by American congressmen and senators, and I've talked to them, who see him as an entirely different person than what this Gersh Kuntzman is writing about. So the American people are under a tremendous psychological propaganda attack, and it's starting to backfire because no one can believe a quote such as this. And the final paragraph I'll read is, Kuntzman says, "So I, for one, am shedding no tears for Andrei Karlov. Frankly, I'm surprised his murder didn't come months ago. After all, this was the lead sentences of a Washington Post story from October 9th. There seems to be no way for the international community to stop the ongoing war crimes being committed by the Syrian regime and its Russian allies, especially in Aleppo. the newspaper reported. But brazenly flouting international law, leaders and rank-and-file officials in both countries are opening themselves up to future justice in multiple ways.
Oh, yeah.
So they're trying to say the United Nations, that moral paragon, is going to somehow step in and discipline Russia, Syria, Iran, and China for not allowing the Wahhabi savages to continue raping little boys, beheading little boys, raping Yazidi women, turning them into sex slaves, and continuing their black flag operation to turn Syria into this smoldering heap of ruins, and simultaneously weaponizing migrants and sending them off into Europe with the camouflage and the license of, quote, refugee, that the stupid traitors such as Merkel in Germany and the brainless robotic cult drones of Sweden and these other Norwegian, Scandinavian countries that are completely hedonistic and godless have welcomed these barbarians into their country, thinking, oh, all they need is a little bit of Scandinavian influence in education, and they'll flower into these fruitful, peaceful, saintly human beings. Well, the opposite is true. You let these savages into your country, and they're going to savage, burn, and destroy, and rape and pillage. And the facts are showing exactly that.
This guy Kuntzman and that other guy Krugman, they're all in the same basket as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you look at what this character wrote in that article. He tries to liken the death of Karloff to the case of Ernst von Rath, Nazi ambassador to France, gunned down by a Jewish student inside his consulate in 1938. Now, apparently this guy has no idea what the timeline is. Like Karloff, Rath was the public face of atrocity, in this case Adolf Hitler's genocide, anti-Semitism, and coming global aggression. Well, there wasn't any genocide at that point, because we're talking about 1938. Was Rath an innocent victim? Certainly not. He had not only defended Hitler's oppression of the Jews as necessary for Germany to flourish, but he stood by idly as Hitler devoured Europe, although he didn't even go into Poland until, October of 1939, and murdered its innocents. He could have stood up to the Nazi leadership when it would have mattered most, but he did not. Oh, really? The foreign secretary, the foreign, what was he? The what to France? The ambassador to France. He's going to stand up to the Nazi leadership. Yeah, that'll work. So, but get this, Karloff's job in Turkey was to ease tensions over Russia's atrocities in Syria and its incursions inside Turkey itself. Well, which incursions is he talking about, and what genocide in Syria exactly? Meaning his job was to enable and normalize Vladimir Putin. Meaningless. Given that role, he wasn't a diplomat but a soldier, and his death is the same whether it came on a battlefield outside Aleppo or in an art gallery in Ankara. His killer was also a soldier, not a terrorist, mind you, a soldier. But, Scott, what sense does this line make? Terrorists kill innocent people with trucks in Christmas markets or with planes in skyscrapers. Soldiers kill their fellow soldiers. I mean, this guy has some sort of an idea that he's a genius writer, and I'm not seeing it. I'm not feeling the genius here.
No, of course not. He's a propagandist. He's a liar. He's a scumbag. Of course, the other example history gives us, John, to model our decisions and our historical context by is, would the United States have stood by if communists had invaded or started to cultivate a revolution in Mexico? Would the United States not have come in and propped up the regime of Mexico to stop the communist takeover of Mexico?
Yes, would the United States have tolerated a buildup of Russian armor there at the Texas-Mexico border? I mentioned that yesterday. I don't think we would.
Yeah.
What are these tanks doing down there? Their guns are pointing our way. What is this?
What's that about? And I think we did something like that in Central America and all that other nonsense. So the history is not on our side when we with hypocrisy try and blame Russia for doing exactly what we've done in the Caribbean and in the Central American countries, and what we would do and the American people would expect us to do to Mexico if the same thing was happening. especially if the communists were raping little boys, burning women alive, doing the most heinous savagery that the human imagination is capable of. So Russia has simply stepped in to prop up its Mexican neighbor, Syria, which has a lot of, white people in Syria, Russian people in Syria. It is not a Muslim, Saudi Arabian, man dress wearing country that wipes their backside with their left hand and has sex with donkeys or sex with men on Man Love Thursdays. That's not Syria. That's Saudi Arabia. That's Iraq. That's Qatar. Well, Iraq under the Sunni regime. Those are the backwards hillbilly countries of the Middle East. That's not Syria. It's not Iran. And Russia has stepped in to stop that because the next step would have been invading and attacking Russia and invading and attacking Iran. And they weren't going to put up with it. China was not going to put up with it either because they've had their own Uyghur fanaticism. Incidentally, that was sponsored by Hillary Clinton and the State Department because I know for a fact she allowed Chinese Uyghur terrorists to be taken out of Guantanamo Bay and sent to Switzerland. Why did she do that? Because the Swiss were bankrolling and money laundering the finances that Saudi Arabia was getting to the Wahhabis in Syria. And they were doing it with Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Covington and Burling and others in this grand money laundering pay-for-play operation. So these incidents are not separate. They are a pattern of a 5-year, I would say longer, because I know Hillary Clinton came in 2008, 2009, and immediately imprisoned Brad Birkenfeld, the Swiss banker, and engaged in all these operations. I've got the WikiLeaks cables to prove it, and I'll send them to you. All of that stuff happened in 2008, 2009, and we're only seeing now all of this coming out because of WikiLeaks. Now, you know, John, I gave this material in 2012 to numerous congressmen and senators. Some of them have acted on it, but a vast majority have not. And I think with the right people in the Department of Justice under Donald Trump's tutelage, you will have crimes of treason and worse being established against people like John Brennan, like Hillary Clinton, like Eric Holder, like Lanny Brewer, like the Attorney General right now. Her name is
Lynch.
That's where we're at. Yeah, Lynch.
Now, let me ask you this. What's this Zionist Israel Likud Netanyahu operation designed to disrupt the Turkish-Russian cooperation? That's Veterans Today. I mean... Yeah,
Veterans Today came out with that analysis, and they were saying that they were surmising that this sort of operation by Israel, Netanyahu, has the fingerprints of a Mossad operation because they may have been calculating that this would cause Russia to get angry at Turkey and be reckless and somehow, start a fight with Turkey and disintegrate the peace and stability in Syria.
Does that make sense to you? They've already shot a plane down. I mean, this makes no sense. They don't get over that stuff easily. I mean, when a NATO country shoots down a Russian plane, that's not generally good. Just saying.
Yeah.
Did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
All right. Well.
Yeah, I don't think the Israelis calculated that accurately. Time will tell. And I'm not following anything yet. I'm just letting the pieces of the puzzle and the evidence pull together. And the real thing is going to be the videotape. The real thing is going to be the analysis of the body, if it did happen. The real thing is going to be tracing the human intel. If it did happen, which in a sense I hope it did, so it'll make this real easy. If it did happen, then the Russians either sacrificed their own guy, which I don't believe. I don't think they would do that. Or this was done by outside elements, and Russia is the beneficiary of this because Putin and Russia benefit from this assassination. I mean, I can't see how they don't benefit. They've got moral authority now. They've destroyed the Obama media establishment. They've prepared a justification for a countermeasure against Obama. They've built even deeper roads into Trump to say, hey, you got to help us out here. Your guys off the reservation, they're trying to destabilize this whole stability. You've said you're going to fight with anybody that fights ISIS. We're doing it, and your own people are coming against us. Or, it's just a reaffirmation of their fanaticism, of their delusion, of their, craziness. So the easiest pick, the easiest way would be if this was a rogue police officer, great. Now we know who our enemy is. We've known it all along, but we're just going to have a nice friendly reminder. And Turkey, you just don't know how to run your own house because this guy shouldn't have been behind our ambassador in the first place. You need to step up. And Russia is going to manage this because we're not going to lose another ambassador. We haven't lost one in, I think it was hundreds of years or something since the last Russian ambassador was killed. And they're also going to step up their game and take out these guys. And I think it binds Russia, Iran, and Syria and China together in a very unique way. And it weakens the West. It weakens all of these European politicians that are continuing to go down this fantasy propaganda role of blaming the Russians for things that don't exist. There are no human rights sufferings. There are no abuses of the assassination of children and women in Aleppo. All of that has been done by the Saudi Arabians, the Qataris, the Kuwaitis, the fanatical Wahhabists that have been bankrolled by these Saudi regimes. And we're seeing that. The bank accounts are there, the money laundering checks. The big thing, John, is when these agents are going to be dragged out and caught. And I think that's going to be that's the reason that they've perhaps launched this ambassadorial attack, is to shift attention away from the MI6, CIA, Mossad agents that are being caught in Aleppo.
The thing that really gets on my nerves about this stuff is Palestine doesn't feature in my world. Israel does not feature in my world. We put up a YouTube video. This gal named Marianne Azizi was just dumping all over the way people are treated in Israel, as far as taking their kids away and divorce and this and that. And sure as hell, some complete dumbass comes onto our YouTube channel, and I'm a Zionist. How the hell can I be a Zionist if I got somebody on there talking about how bad it is inside Israel? So if I say anything about Israel, in a minute there's going to be some idiot out there with his cartoon tools that's putting stars of David on my underwear and on my forehead and everywhere else. And it's really nauseating. I'll tell you one of the things that about the only thing that really gets to me, and that's not much, is the abject stupidity of people who feel like they just have to sing out because they're so sure they know what's going on, and they don't know what from Shinola. I would tell them to go to hell, but I suspect they're already there. So would somebody tell me exactly why would veterans today, and we know that, what's that guy, Fetzer?
Yeah, Jim Fetzer.
This is a guy who's been on our program several times, wants to tell us how to edit it and what to do and all that. Then when we run into him at a conference, he doesn't even have the decency to come over and stick his hand out. Oh, everybody hails him as a genius, but the only time they're hailing him as a genius is when he's slamming Israel. I don't care. If that's his thing, knock yourself out. But would someone explain? I just took an opportunity here to fire off a few shots. East, west, north, south, there, we're good.
Yeah.
What is it with Israel in the mix here? The only thing I know, they've been around for 68 years, they've been declared an actual country for 68 years, right?
Yeah.
And they're a pain in the backside of everybody around them. At least that's what, kill the Jews, okay, all right, fine. We got that part. What possible interest could they have in an assassination operation that involves a Russian ambassador in Turkey when it's well known it's as well known to everybody in the security services what's going on there as, I say this for about the third time, do we think that if the NSA is recording everything that I know they might have had Hillary bleeping Clinton's emails. So do we think that maybe the leak of her emails might have come from inside our own security services rather than the Russians? So now I jump to Israel again. How, in your opinion, how could this assassination, if that's what it really was, staged or real, how would this serve Israel in any way?
Well, it really can't. The genuine suspicion and hostility to the Netanyahu Israeli Zionist elements and parties has been classically they were trying to destabilize the Muslim nations around it. That's why 9/11 was triggered. There were some evidences that the Israeli messenger system communicated to Jews and people on that, which are all Jewish in New York, not to go to the World Trade Center. There's a lot of material that has been exposed and analyzed that implicate Israel in that 9/11 issue. With regards to the ambassador assassination, we have to put on our theoretical hats and say, okay, how could they benefit from this? Versus, what's actually happened, what was possibly in their mind if they had anything to do with it. And, you and I are of the same stripe. We don't care if people are, Jews, Mexicans, Chinese, little blue Martians. People are people, and let them worship their own God in their own way, and that's their own choice. Just don't rape and pillage my daughter or kill my wife or my parents and tell me to change my religion or anything about me. Then we've got a problem.
Yeah, then we're going to kill all of you.
Yeah, that's right.
Negotiations are over at that point.
That's right. So the Israeli benefit from this, I don't think it'll happen. I don't think it can happen. I think Putin will never react in that sort of a way. He's a very cool chess player. The only hypothesis could be they could try and whip up an animosity against all of these Muslims and create a civil war in Europe and America with a Muslim versus non-Muslim fight, and then Israel is on the side of the non-Muslims, and they extinguish their enemy, and the rest of the world is in tatters and is wearing burlap and totally tore up. That's sort of the Veterans Today, analysis of the Zionist personality, not Jewish. We always have to be careful that we don't, I think, fall into this, Jewish is bad in this, because that can lead us astray. The Zionist element, the political supremacy suspicion is what fuels a lot of this suspicion of the Zionist element. But we always have to stick to the facts.
What are we not seeing here? I mean, if the whole thing for Israel is let's just keep let's keep trouble gymmed up between some of these Muslim countries. Let's just keep that going. Okay, all right, I get that. But what are we not seeing here? Is it just coincidence that this Berlin truck assault happens? The diplomat gets whacked in Moscow. The ambassador gets whacked in Turkey. Is this just stuff that's going on, or is there any way that we can contrive a connection between these events?
Well, John, I think we can begin to assemble the pieces. The evidence is coming in. I'm going to keep you informed as I get these pieces and these documents and these links, and the picture assembles itself. I think it's key that Russia and Turkey be analyzed, and all of this forensic material, the videotapes and the body and the chemistry and the actual layout of the ambassador and the layout of the shooter be analyzed. All that's forthcoming, but I think we're going to see the appearance of some sort of a Turkish intelligence operation that may be exposed, it may be covered up. and it's going to come to benefit Putin and Trump. So I'm going to have to run though right now. Let's pick it up at another time. And I'm honored to always be with you, and I appreciate you giving me the time to give you a briefing on this. And I hope it helped.
I appreciate it very much. I know you're a busy guy, and you came on quick, but I just felt the need to speak with you about this because it's just same as in your world, man. It's real hard to get a straight answer out of anybody. So God bless. Merry Christmas if I don't talk to you beforehand. Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you on the other side of December 31. All right.
God bless you, John. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take care out there.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Scott Bennett, everybody. Wow. Thanks to our guests, Mr. Sykes and Mr. Bennett. You know, it's funny. 2016, if you're into the numerological thing, 2016, that adds up to 9. And several people have said, yes, this year is a year of completion, which suggests that 2017 is liable to be a real rocker. So we'll do what we have done. We'll continue to do it, and that is, sharpen those critical thinking skills as we find ourselves just deluged with lots of information, but so little actual intel. We'll do our best on this end. You keep your eyes up always, and we together shall make ready for what's to come. God bless. Be seeing you.